Welcome to another transition episode of the It's a Mimic podcast, where you never know what you're going to get. Welcome to our conversation on the 2024 Player's Handbook. I'm Adam, and with me are Megan and Miaca.
This episode is the second part of our discussion on what's changed between 5th edition and the new updated rule set.
So in the last one, I went through a bunch of character creation and all those rules, and now I want to talk about how combat works and how the conditions work and some of the mechanical changes that will impact gameplay on a much more specific basis instead of kind of the broad discussion on what's changed for character creation and for running the game. But the first thing that I need to tell both of you right off the bat is there's a rules glossary at the back, and I'm going to get into this a little bit later as well, but we now have a table of contents which very clearly lays out where to find the general topics. We still have an index at the back of the book, although that's not available, I don't think, on D&D Beyond. That way you can look up specific things, but for the rules, everything from dark vision to the conditions and all that stuff, it's all listed over the span of a handful of pages, so that it's like one really extensive DM screen that players can reference to get definitions on the more common rules in Dungeons and Dragons 5.5 or 2024, whatever you want to call it. So,
do we know if they've released, now speaking of that, if they've released a new DM screen?
Yeah, and I have it, and it's awesome.
Oh, I want one.
The next time you come over, I will show it to you. It is great. It's probably my favorite DM screen that I've seen in a while, but it is a little bombastic and cartoony compared to a lot of the older styles. Mm-hmm. It's very, very saturated with color.
Yeah.
But it's got all the necessary stuff on the inside. I think were good choices. And it shows every single class and all of the different species that are available in the player's handbook on this DM screen, and they all seem to be in the same style and working together. It's really fun and evocative, and it's cool to see.
Nice.
The different inspirations and styles now for what they think player characters are going to look like. So anyway, let's jump into the mechanical rules here. And I know that you guys are not my big mechanics and rules lawyers when it comes to D&D. However, this stuff is going to affect everybody. Everyone needs to know this stuff.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So let's talk about rests first. First of all, adventurers can't spend every hour adventuring. This is how we start off this section. I'm quoting directly out of the player's handbook. They need rest. Any creature can take hour-long short rests, that's plural, in the midst of a day, and an 8-hour-long rest to end it. Regaining hit points is one of the main benefits of a rest. So that's what it says. I want to be clear about this. Yes, you can still take multiple short rests in the middle of a day, but taking a long rest ends the adventuring day. Rules is written. So when you sit down to have a long rest at 10 in the morning, because you already got your asses kicked because you started the dungeon at 6 a.m., you're done for the day. That's it.
Well, that's interesting. But
yeah.
I guess that makes sense too.
I think that the idea of being done at 10 a.m. is a bit of an outlier, but I just did a session Sean was running, and we got up at the crack of dawn. We were out in the wilderness, got up at the crack of dawn, had a couple of quick fights, got back by noon, and then we wanted to take a long rest, and he said, great, we're just going to socialize and do town time for the rest of the day then. And he followed this rule, and it was very simple and easy to run. So it also, I'm going to quote this directly too, a long rest is a period of extended downtime, at least 8 hours, available to any creature. During a long rest, you sleep for at least 6 hours and perform no more than 2 hours of light activity, such as reading, talking, eating, or standing watch. During sleep, you have the unconscious condition. After you finish a long rest, you must wait at least 16 hours before starting another one. So you cannot chain long rests like that either.
Could you imagine going 16 hours without going back to sleep?
In 2025? No.
But I like how it's I haven't read the rules as written in the original PHB in a long time, but the fact that 6 hours legitimately has to be sleeping, is that how it's defined within the old book as well, in terms of you have to be sleeping to get a long rest, or is it more just 8 hours of doing no activity is what I remember it being?
That has been our own homebrew rule. I never bothered to look it up in the 2014
I thought so, yeah.
edition, but I can look it up now. Give me 1 second. I'm glad we're doing this online. Here's what I found with a quick AI overview from a Google search. I hate that they do this. Fuck it. You know what? Because it says nothing about sleep at all, but it's AI. I've discovered that if you add the word fucking to it, AI doesn't pick it up and you just get your number one top result. So if you want to look up, how groceries are, like what time the grocery store is open till, right? And you don't want the AI answer, you can just be like fucking grocery store times and it kills that, which is really nice.
Oh, Adam.
I don't see anything here about sleep at all, Megan.
Okay, yeah, I thought so. Because that felt weird to me where it specifically uses the word that you need to sleep.
Yeah. I think that this is supposed to force the idea of managing exhaustion better, and we'll talk about that and the unconscious feature or condition later, right? So
fair enough, yeah.
What do you get from a long rest? Well, it lets you do a number of things. First of all, you heal. You regain all of your hit points, all of your maximum hit points, and all your hit dice. That's new. Remember before, you could only regain half your hit dice with a long rest.
Whoa.
Now you get them all back.
Now I don't have to do half math for hit dice anymore.
Yep. You also get to reset all of your ability scores if they were reduced somehow. I hate all of this. I think your hit point maximum or ability scores, if they get reduced, it should say in the monster stat block or the spell or whatever it is that reduced them, how long it takes to recover from this specific thing and under what conditions. The fact that it doesn't means I'm hoping to see lots of maximum hit points and stat damage in monster abilities now, because if we're going to recover it so easily, then we should be running into it more often.
Yeah, exactly. I think that if you're going to just give this resource back, there has to be another way to balance that back out. Yeah.
Yeah. Also, with the long rest, exhaustion is still reduced by 1 level, and exhaustion still has 6 levels, and the 6th one being death. So, that hasn't changed. Now, there are very clear rules about what happens if your long rest gets interrupted. First of all, if an hour of the long rest has passed already, you automatically gain the benefits of a short rest, which means you can burn through all your hit dice because you're about to get a long rest, right? And second, if you get interrupted, you can immediately go back to resting after you've dealt with whatever the issue is, but you have to add an additional hour to balance this out. So if in the middle of the night, bandits come in and try to attack you, the guy on watch raises the alarm, everybody comes out and fights. The fight lasts for 3 minutes because that's a very long combat against bandits, but here we are. And everybody goes back to sleep again. You now have to add an additional 9th hour to the long rest in order to get the benefits of it. So what counts as an interruption? Rolling initiative, taking damage, an hour of physical activity. Bard should take note. Fucking your way through a long rest is not going to be, a viable option anymore. And casting any spell with a level over cantrip. This includes rituals because it doesn't say that it doesn't. Rituals won't use up a spell slot, but if you want to identify a bunch of objects with a ritual and the identify spell, you now have a maximum number of items that you can do like that before you will not get the benefits of a long rest.
Yeah, that always checks out. Makes sense to me.
For short rests, it's the same requirement as a long rest, but for 1 hour. Short rests have the same hit dice rules for recovering health that 5th edition had, and it specifies that, yes, you add your con modifier to each roll of the dice. I'm going to do math, but bear with me. It's worth it. If you have +2 for your constitution and d10s for your hit dice, because you're a fighter, paladin, or ranger, and you need to recover 13 hit points, then you roll a d10 once, you add the 2, and you see where you stand. Assuming you roll a 1, that means that you heal 3 of the missing 13 hit points. And then you get to roll another die, and then you add your modifier again. No more of rolling 4 d10s and adding your modifier once. You add it for every single one of the dice.
That's dope.
Yeah. Your constitution modifier now helps you a lot. You will recover health so much quicker. Another difference is that if your short rest gets interrupted, then you're shit out of luck. Start again. You need a new short rest, which means if you're doing a short rest in a dungeon or behind enemy lines, you get interrupted, that short rest doesn't count. It makes it a lot more dangerous to do that.
Mm-hmm.
And finally, something that I need to scream from the rooftops about rests is You cannot rest if you have 0 hit points. If you are stabilized, but you have 0 hit points, you are not resting. You're still fucked up. Someone can either heal you or you lay face down in the mud where you belong. But either way, if you have 0 hit points, you have 1d4 hours to wait in order to regain that initial hit point. And then you can start a rest, either short or long. So how do you guys feel about these resting rules? They've changed a little bit, but in some very fundamental ways. Let's roll initiative.
Sure.
I got a 13.
8.
12.
I like these. I like that they're very laid out. I don't think they're particularly punishing. I think that they help players stay alive longer at low levels and will have very little impact at high levels. So I'm okay with this.
I'm okay with it too. I don't know. I guess from the way like we play D&D, it's like we do a long rest and then like we get up and then we just continue on, and it just I guess it doesn't really feel like a long rest. So I feel like now that they're actually like saying, okay, here's your time limit, and it'll be like the next day or whatever. That adds a little bit more like pressure in a way. It's not bad, but it's like, oh, we gotta hurry up and get this going, or try to get this done in time and stuff like that. So I kind of like it. I'm kind of like a little thrown off by it, but I think it'll be great in game.
Yeah.
If I can be honest, the reason that we run rests a little bit differently as a homebrew thing, because I always make rests 9 hours, a long rest, not because you need to be resting that long, but to cover the bits and pieces of, I'm going to go get more firewood. I'm going to get in and out of my armor right before I can sleep and all that shit. I do that. And also when we take watches, we always do it in groups of 3. So 9 divides better by 3 than 8 does. So we always have a grace period. So this doesn't really affect us too much, but it will affect most tables.
Yeah.
I think maybe because I just came off of a game where we were playing like the extra hard rules, where a long rest was like 16 hours. I think it was actually a week was a long rest.
Yeah.
And then like short rest was like 3 days or something like that. So I couldn't imagine sleeping. Like that's why the word sleep hit me the way that it did, because I couldn't imagine sleeping for 7 days to get my long rest. So, but like the way we played it was, yes, it's 7 days, but that means you aren't going adventuring, you're not going on hikes, you're not going on walks, you're not hunting, you're not doing arduous activity, but you're just at home by the campfire, making dinner and just like being a person, right? So the fact that these are so clearly defined, as in you have to be asleep for a certain amount of time, but they put in the 2 hours as kind of like light work can happen within those 2 hours. I feel like that clarity is very helpful, but it just struck me in my brain so hard when I read sleep, because of how traumatized I am from playing hard mode. So, but I know I like the changes, and I like the wording, and I like the clarity. So
it's interesting because, hold on, let me pull up the DMG really quick. I know it's a player's handbook episode, but on page 267. Nope, that's wrong. That must be the old D&D or the old DMG. The 2024 revisions don't seem to have a rule for gritty realism at all. Like this is just how it works. So we have lost that now in 5.5, as far as I could tell. So interesting. Anyway.
So I guess there's not a rule that's written anymore. Yeah.
No, what I would be looking at is...
Well, I'm sure we can find a way to homebrew. All you have to do hard mode is go back to the old rules. That's all you have to do.
or have, if you want to get the benefits of a long rest, and you have to get a minimum of 6 hours of sleep every night, right? Like, I don't feel like this is too hard to homebrew, but it is going to impact how the game is played as far as resource management. And one of the big resources that has changed, and I got into this in some amount of detail last episode, but I feel the need to have this context for this episode as well, is the action economy. Yes, we still have bonus actions and reactions and movement and so on and so forth. It largely functions the same way, but for actions, we now have a specific list of the things that you can do. It's very straightforward. It's early in the book, and it is there for players to understand. It's listed out. This is the kind of shit that you can do. So I'm going to focus on the things that have, like, I'm going to go through the list, but I'm not going to do a big deep dive, just focusing on the little differences. So first of all, an attack is one of the things you can do with an action. You can do an attack action. And that means that you've hit with a weapon or an unarmed strike. You will notice now that does not include magical attacks. You can have a dash, disengage, dodge. These are all the same thing, right? The same that they were from 5th edition, right? Like none of these have changed too much. The help action, you still get to use this action to help with ability checks and whatnot. But one of the things that at least never happens at my table, which I should point out to you two, the most selfish players at the table when it comes to the action economy, you can use this action to give an ally advantage on an attack. So you give up the action on your turn so that the rogue at the table can do sneak attack damage. You can hide. This just is a stealth check. You can now influence. You use the influence action. Some tables will have players that say, I want to do the influence action. And this is during initiative. You use your action to make an animal handling, deception, intimidation, performance, or persuasion check. Now we get into the magic action. And this is the biggest departure as far as the wording goes. When you use a magic action, you can either cast a spell, use a magic item, or use a magical feature, like one of your class features. You can still do a ready action. It's largely the same. You now do a search action, which lets you use either insight, medicine, perception, or survival. You can do a study action, which is all of the knowledges from previous editions: arcana, history, investigation, nature, and religion. Or now utilize, which is use a non-magical item. Now, this is not a comprehensive list because, you'll notice sleight of hand, athletics, acrobatics are not listed here, but it covers the main items, the main way that we're thinking about how long an action takes on a turn. Do you guys have any thoughts about this?
I like, again, the clarity here is nice because there's nothing that slows down combat economy more than somebody being like, okay, well, during my turn, if I wanted to read this book to understand this while this person is doing that, what roll do I have to make? And does that count as a bonus action or an action?
Yeah.
So the fact that it's kind of broken down into like, yes, doing these certain types of checks count as an action will be very helpful as a DM in terms of, that it takes this amount of time to do something.
Yeah, unless it says it in a specific item description or a spell or something that says, oh, now you can do this as a bonus action. No, if you want to do a check in combat, it is an action.
Yeah, and the help one I like a lot. I think
that's always been there. You guys just don't like to help the other people.
You're correct. But now other people can help us. And
everyone just helps me anyways. So.
One of the things that I want to point out here, while you guys are being absolutely fucking terrible, is we're not getting into it in this episode, but I want to point out healing spells are more powerful, generally speaking, in the new rule set. And you are regenerating your hit dice a lot faster with long rests and whatnot. And there's no maximum number of short rests that you can take, which means you can burn through hit dice. There's going to be a lot more healing that happens both inside and outside of combat, which means I feel like, even though we don't have the monster manual at the time of this recording, I feel like the monsters are getting deadlier. And from the little previews that I've seen and the little snippets they've shown us, the monsters are going to do more shit. They're going to have different tactics, and DMs are going to start thinking more strategically with them based on how they're written. That is my gut reaction right now. So with there being more access to healing and more deadly monsters, the idea of having a list of actions of the shit that you can do in initiative to impact things a little bit more, this is going to make a huge difference, right? And I like having this, and I almost want to print it out and give it to all of my even seasoned players to be like, hey guys, remember, you can just do nothing and dodge. That is an option.
Yeah, I was going to say, because we're going to be playing for my first time in a 5.5 campaign, I'm probably going to print that out on a little cheat sheet card for myself, just so that I can remind myself that these are the things that I can do, right?
Yep. Yep.
So
I really like the study action. Was that in
No, it was like you can use a skill, right? Like that was kind of what it was before, but it says, hey, if you want to use one of these skills in initiative, you call it a study action. You declare that I'm doing a study action and I'd like to use my nature ability to do that, right?
Okay, cool.
So that brings us on to the meat and potatoes of this episode, and that's going to be combat. The very first thing that I want to go over is the idea of weapon masteries. I'm going to get into this in greater detail in the next episode, but you should know that there's some things now called weapon masteries. we still have weapon properties, like a finesse weapon that allows you to attack with either strength or dex, or reach weapons that add 5 feet to your melee attacks with that weapon, like with a pike, for example. But now, every weapon, from a dagger to a musket, yes, guns are listed now, has one of 8 keywords that give you something extra when you attack with this weapon. For example, a warhammer has the weapon mastery called push. All warhammers have this. If you are proficient with it, you can do this. And it lets you push larger creatures or smaller, so large or smaller creatures, 10 feet away from you with a successful hit. There are some limitations on how often you can do this, but I'm going to get into that for the next episode. But for example, I'm currently playing an orc rogue, and I've got a short sword and a dagger and a short bow. At any given time, I can have, at the beginning of the day, so I choose this every day, what are the 2 weapons I'm going to use the most? I can use the weapon masteries on those weapons. And this means that we can do a lot more as martial characters.
Yeah, I think this is one of the first fights Rome and I had over the new rules versus the old rules, because he was coming at me with my new rogue can do this and do that with their weapons, and I was like, no, you can't. That's a special thing that only this like species or class can do. And then it was an argument back and forth until about an hour later I realized he was reading the weapon mastery rules from the new 5.5 and not talking to me about just building a character in 5.0.
Yeah.
I like it though. I think it's awesome that like, now it makes sense that you would pick this character to be able to use a weapon in a very specific way and someone else can't because they're not trained in it. That just makes sense to me.
Yeah,
so
I think that that's really cool. And I also mentioned that the weapon properties still exist. And the one thing I want to point out is that if you attack with 2 light weapons, now in 5.5, you don't have to stick to melee weapons anymore. Hand crossbows count. In the past, you'd attack with your attack action with a light melee weapon, and then you'd get to use your bonus action to attack with a different light melee weapon, short sword and dagger, for examples. Now, though, you can shoot someone up to 120 feet away with the hand crossbow. So attack with the sword, shoot with the hand crossbow. You still need to load it. It still has that property, but if it's loaded, you can use it as part of your light weapons, your 2-weapon fighting, right?
do you know if we got rid of the disadvantage for doing point blank?
It's still there.
Son of a, it's the stupidest shit on the planet. Get rid of that, Wizards of the Coast.
No, I like it because how many times have I seen in movies like the idea that you're just not good at close range with long range weapons. How many times have you seen the action hero grab the gun and push it away, or like take it apart in the other person's hand? I can't remember which movie it was where someone shot a crossbow into the stomach, like aimed at the stomach of the person they were with. But the hero, whoever they shot, grabbed the bolt and held it still in place mid-shot, right? So it was still stuck with the crossbow. Like, I think the idea here is that you just can't aim properly. And so you have disadvantage to do the damage that you want to do, right? So, and I don't mind that. Plus, 9 times out of 10, you're going up against a fucking shield. And when you're that close, the shield is so fucking huge in your field of what you can attack that I know you hate it. Makes sense to me. But let's talk about what's changed when it comes to fucking up your enemies, because this is Megan where you want to hear all this. So the first thing I noticed is that drawing a weapon is no longer a part of your movement. Now it's a part of the attack action. This doesn't count for all the bonus attacks. An attack action, you can draw a new weapon every time, but you can draw or stow it as part of each attack. You need to be able to attack, and again, you're drawing or stowing them. Drawing ammunition or items that can be thrown is automatically part of the attack. All of this makes throwing knives and darts way more viable.
Agreed. That makes me happy.
The second thing I went looking for was surprise, because there was no surprise condition in 5th edition. I want to see what they're doing now. And it's way fucking clearer, but it also feels like it's been neutered some. Here's what it says. I'm going to quote it directly. If a combatant is surprised by combat, that combatant has disadvantage on their initiative roll.
Yeah.
I find that a little disappointing compared to what it was before, where like if you went first in initiative and they were surprised, they wouldn't be able to do some things. You'd have advantage on stuff. Like it was more punishing. But I guess that protects high CR enemies like Vecna or Strahd from getting surprised too easily. And it's going to give people kind of a more flattened playing field when it comes to initiative and starting off that round one.
Yeah, because I mean, even if you're fighting higher CR creatures, most of the time, if they're high enough, they will not be able to be surprised. So
I want to point out that the assassin specifically required you to be going early in initiative before your enemies for your big fuck you attack in the first round of combat.
mm-hmm.
I haven't looked into the assassin. It still exists. Haven't looked into it yet. I'm curious to see how this impacts that.
Yeah, it'd be interesting.
Mm-hmm.
I also noticed that the opportunity attacks now use the wording, any creature you can see leaves your reach, instead of being a hostile creature that leaves your reach. Any creature you can see. This is going to matter in some specific instances with neutral creatures and even with allies when you're like a warcaster and you need to like attack to heal some things. And like there will be some significant like niche instances where this wording will be impactful. The other thing, which I got about halfway through doing and just could not be fucking bothered to do, is looked at mounted combat. It's so clunky and it's largely the same and it's fucky and it never works the way we want it to. So that unfortunately did not get an update. What did get an update, Megan, is the one thing that I wanted to have you on this episode for, and that was the idea of grappling.
Yay!
Yay! Grappling is now one of the 3 options that you have when you make an unarmed strike. The options are you can punch for 1 damage plus your strength modifier, assuming you're not a monk or something and you do more than the 1 damage. You can shove to push someone back 5 feet, or you can grapple. Before we jump into grappling, I want to point out that shoving is no longer the attacker's athletics versus the defender's athletics or acrobatics. It's now up to the defender to just roll a strength or dex save against a DC. The DC is based on 8 plus the attacker's proficiency bonus and strength modifier. So it works very much like the spellcasting DCs and whatnot that you have for spellcasters, right? You have to beat this DC when they force you to save. This is an interesting distinction that might affect more power gamey players when it comes to choosing which skill proficiencies to choose. Skills become a little bit less important in combat now because it's not going to be on round 1.
Mm-hmm.
I'll get back to that in a sec. Grappling, though, first. It works on the same mechanic. Defender has to choose between strength or dex, and it's versus the same DC. 8 plus strength modifier plus proficiency bonus. Strength modifier specifically.
Mm-hmm.
That does mean, and I haven't looked into the wording on how monks or anything operate now, but if you're a dex character, grappling is harder for you.
Yeah.
And you can only grapple if the creature's one size category larger than you or smaller, and if you have a free hand. But now you can grapple a number of creatures equal to the number of hands you have, which is fun. It still reduces their movement to 0, but now it gives the defender disadvantage on attack rolls against anyone else except the creature grappling it. And yes, you can still drag or carry someone you've grappled, but it means you have to move at essentially half speed. It's more common, like it's an extra foot for movement. So if you're in difficult terrain, 30 feet becomes 10 feet instead of 15. It's mechanically clunky, but that's a different conversation. Interestingly, after the grapple has succeeded, the defender can then try an acrobatics or athletics check to escape, but the DC will be the same. So it's a save on round 1 for the grapple, and then after that, you have to burn an action to use one of the 2 skills to get free, which means that if you don't have proficiency in a strength or dex save, you may have to wait until round 2 of the grapple if you've got proficiency in athletics or acrobatics. So it kind of spreads it out a little bit more across the proficiencies, but it's a more complicated way of dealing with it from a defender's standpoint. From an attacker standpoint, you don't even have to roll dice. You just say, beat this save. So I think it's an interesting thing to take note of for DMs.
Yeah.
The last thing I want to talk about before we move on is death. Here are the rules as written. A monster dies, the instant it drops to 0 hit points, although a dungeon master can ignore this rule for an individual monster and treat it like a character. You'll notice that it doesn't say creature or player character, it says monster and character. That implies that all NPCs get death saving throws until you look up the definition of NPC. which states that all NPCs are monsters that have personal names and distinct personalities. So, the 7 ninja assassins are all monsters, but their leader, Master Baterson, who has hairy palms and is going blind, is considered an NPC. The moment you give it a name and personality, it's an NPC. Even the background characters that are in a market are considered monsters until you identify them specifically.
That can get overly complex and cause an argument at the table.
I also feel like it's an unnecessary distinction. Like,
yeah,
it was fine the way it was. Fuck. Anyway, still talking about death. Death by massive combat still exists. When it comes to death saves, they largely operate the same way as 5th edition. But remember that if you take damage while at 0 hit points, you lose 1 death save. If you get hit by a critical hit, you lose 2 death saves. And because you're unconscious, anyone that hits you with the melee attack within 5 feet of you has advantage and auto crits. And now...
I don't like that.
That's always been that way. But now the update is, if the damage you take is more than your character's maximum hit point total, you just fucking die.
And before, wasn't it if you take double your max hit points?
No. So the way that it was before is, if you, like, it's always been that, if you take more than your maximum hit point, if like, let me run the math on this. If you have, let's keep it easy, 10 hit points, right? You take 20 points of damage, you're dead.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
Death by massive damage, that still exists. But now it is listed with the death saves that if you are at 0 hit points and you are making death saves and they hit you once, but even if it's not a critical and you have 10 hit points, but they hit you for 12 damage, you auto fucking die. Death saves are no longer on the table. You're dead.
Got you. That makes more sense to me.
And now, instead of there being something called non-lethal damage, you can knock out a creature like this. I'm going to read this directly. When you would reduce a creature to 0 hit points with a melee attack. So remember, I'm jumping out of the quote for a second. Remember, not ranged, not spells, right? A melee attack. You can instead reduce the creature to 1 hit point and give it the unconscious condition. Then it then starts a short rest, and at the end of which that condition ends on it. The condition ends early if the creature regains any more hit points, or if someone takes an action to administer first aid to it, making a successful DC 10 medicine check. So you can just choose, instead of reducing them to 0, I'm going to reduce them to 1. And you don't have to declare it ahead of time. So this means you don't have to guess how many hit points they have.
Yeah.
When the creature would die, when the creature would die, you just say, no, I'm going to knock it down to unconscious. Just going to knock it out.
Yeah. I'm assuming that because it states specifically melee attack, that if you were to do a ranged attack or a spell, that doesn't count. Right?
No. If you reduce them to 0, they're dying or doing death saves or they're dead or whatever, right? So,
got you. Yeah, makes sense.
Really quickly, how do you guys feel about this one? Like all of these combat rules?
I like the fact that grappling is a part of just non-lethal, unhanded combat. Like it just falls within that rule set, and that we now actually have a distinction of what those 3 options are.
Yeah, it's unarmed strike. It's not unhanded combat.
Unhanded combat. Yes, unarmed. I was going to say unarmed combat, right? Yeah, I just said unhanded instead.
It is specifically part of the unarmed strike mechanics, and that is definitely a thing that is in the rules glossary. You can look that up. So that's what it's called, unarmed strike. Miaca, how do you feel about these rules?
The death save thing was a little interesting to me.
In what way?
Well, can you clarify for me again? You said that if the monster does like a critical hit, you're just dead. Like you don't even have save anymore?
No. Okay, so you don't deal with a whole lot of death saves because you tend to play one-on-one with me, and you don't see death saves very often because I kind of pull back a lot of the deadly factor. I'll go after your NPCs, but not you necessarily so much. So the way that it's always worked is if you get to 0 hit points and you go down, you make death saves as normal. If someone is there still attacking you or you are still taking damage, every time that you take damage, it counts as just an auto fail. You take the damage. This is particularly dangerous because this does not happen on your turn. So if there are 3 people standing around you hitting you, you can take 3 rounds of auto fails and you are dead. Additionally, on top of that, every critical hit counts as losing 2 death saves. auto-failing twice. And the problem here is that when you are prone and you're unconscious, everything is hitting you, and you're treating the damage like it's a critical hit. So my example of there being 3 people around you hitting, it only needs to be 2.
Interesting.
Additionally, on top of that, they no longer just have to say, and he hits you, take 1 point. I mean, you want to roll to find out if there's a critical. But additionally, on top of that, if you then have to roll damage and find out if you did more than the character's maximum damage, and if you did, auto death. Doesn't matter the number of death saves.
Okay.
So, how do you feel about all that?
That's complicated. But in a way, I kind of like it as well.
I think it won't come up very often at a table, or at least I hope not, outside of tier 1, right? Tier 1's a death.
Even in my years of playing D&D, I've probably only come across maybe once or twice this actually happening, where someone has to sit there and do the mental math of, oh my god, did I just die? Like, it doesn't even happen. It does not happen that often. Even in higher tiers, sometimes it barely happens. So, especially
when you've got 100 hit points, right?
Correct, right? So it's not something that happens often, and I'm glad that they kind of kept the rules similar to what it used to be. I think that the addition of NPCs versus monsters that's an unnecessary rule to add. I think we could have just kept death the way it was before without fussing with it, and we would have been fine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Miaca, any final thoughts before we move on to the next section?
No.
All right. Moving on, I want to talk for a moment about conditions. Conditions are largely the same, but they all end up getting listed out in the rules glossary, so they're easy to find, and they're in alphabetical order. So if you need to look up deafened, you no longer have to find the condition portion of the player's handbook and look up blinded and deafened. Like it's all easily laid out now, which is very nice. Let's start with exhaustion, because that's the big scary one. So let's get out of the way first. It's changed significantly. Instead of that weird table that actually got misprinted on the inside of a DM screen that I got one time from a third-party creator, you get a very simple set of rules to follow. -5 feet of movement for every level of exhaustion, -2 for every D20 test for every level of exhaustion. Let me explain that, because I don't think I talked to you guys about D20 tests yet. D20 tests are every time you roll a D20. It includes ability checks, attacks, saves, initiative, death saves. These are all considered D20 tests. And sometimes in the wording, you will find something that says, this affects all D20 tests instead of this affects saves. So it just means that it covers any time you roll a D20. So again, that is -2 to every D20 test for every level of exhaustion. -2 to attacks, saves, ability scores, -2 to initiative, like all of it. And at level 6, you still die. Level 6 levels of exhaustion is death. The difference now is that you are no longer stuck moving 0 feet, like your movement was reduced to 0 at 5 levels of exhaustion. Now, I think all the player characters can move 30 feet around, so that you can still retreat only 5 feet, but you can dash for 10. And it means you're rolling with a -10 modifier on everything, which is scary, because that includes death saving throws.
Yeah. But wasn't it before that, like, it was just you got straight up disadvantage on any saves or what have you before?
Yeah.
I feel like because it's just -2 for every level, that weirdly feels more digestible to me.
It's simpler and easier. It's actually less punishing for the first level of exhaustion. It's roughly on par for the second, and it's more punishing for 3 or more.
Yeah.
But how often do you get more than 2 levels of exhaustion at a time?
Not often.
Not often, unless it's you or Dan. You guys end up taking a lot because you push your characters to the brink, right?
Yeah, or you're playing a survival game where you're in like treacherous areas, and it just makes sense to be in the shits by the time you get to level 3 or 4.
Yeah. So looking at incapacitated next, it's now much scarier because before you could use bonus actions or reactions, before you could not use bonus actions or reactions as well as the actions. So you can only move now. That's it. That's all you get to do. Also, concentration auto fails, and you can't speak, and you have disadvantage on initiative rolls. Being incapacitated fucks you up. You can essentially run away. So no spells, no attacks. You can't even dodge. You can only run away. The invisible condition now gives you advantage on not just attack rolls, but also initiative. And of course, enemies still have disadvantage to hit you. Petrified now operates the way that I have always homebrewed it. Before, you weren't aware of the world around you. It was like suspended animation. You don't you're not aware of it. Now you are. You're
Mm.
aware of the world. You don't age, and you can't do a damned thing. Also, poisons and diseases that you have are still active now. And there's nothing in there about whether or not you don't need to eat or sleep or drink food. So you could die from exhaustion, hunger, or thirst if you're petrified.
That makes a lot more sense to me now.
Yeah, because you're no longer just turned to stone. I wonder if in the Medusa stat block, for example, it's going to list out being petrified to stone, and so it comes with additional things. This is just regular petrified, right? Like an extreme version of getting fucking lockjaw, right?
Yeah.
Next is the prone condition. And it now states that it doesn't cost anything to drop prone of your own volition, but you cannot do it if you don't have any speed left. So what that means is if your speed is 30 and you want to run and then drop prone to get behind something, you can only run 25 and then drop prone. Weirdly, it doesn't say this in the rule glossary. It says this in the movement and position section in chapter 1. I did a lot of double checking notes and running around on that. And I want to circle back to the idea of exhaustion again really quickly. Player characters still having 5 feet of movement at 5 levels of exhaustion means that you can still drop prone to get behind cover, and you can still technically take the dodge action. This is huge compared to what 5e had to offer before.
Yeah, that's fair.
Now, being stunned also means that you can't speak at all. In 5e, you could speak falteringly. Now, nope, shut up. We have removed that argument from the table.
Yeah.
There's a weird little hiccup in the rules that I don't have an answer for, and it's a holdover from 5th edition. I wished that this had been addressed. It wasn't. It's such a specific, weird use case, but here we go. When unconscious, you are both incapacitated and prone. The attack rolls against you have advantage. When you look up what the prone condition has to offer, it says, an attack roll against you has advantage if the attacker's within 5 feet of you. Otherwise, that attack roll has disadvantage. So, does someone 10 feet away from you have advantage or disadvantage? Unconscious says advantage, and you're prone, but prone says disadvantage. So, you got to talk to your DM and get a definitive ruling. I could make arguments, honestly, for either side of this discussion, or just split the difference and say, use a normal roll, who gives a fuck? We'll split the difference. So, how do you guys feel about all of these condition changes? I want to roll initiative again because it's been a while.
Let's do it.
I got a 1.
13.
5.
Megan, how do you feel about the condition changes?
I enjoy them to a certain degree. I like the changes to the exhaustion. Again, I just finished playing a survival game, and having to roll disadvantage for every fucking roll we did when we were exhausted at like first level was the most frustrating thing on the planet because I just continued to get more exhausted. So the fact that it is just a -2 for every like D20 test and so on and so forth, I enjoy that simplicity of it. It's also easier to remember because I always remember whenever an exhaustion rule would come up, I'd have to bring up what each level meant. And I think this is a lot easier to digest that in future games, I won't have to look it up anymore because it's easier to understand.
Yeah.
The other ones are pretty straightforward. They're all pretty much the same. As you mentioned, there's not a lot of difference there. But the prone one seems a little bit strange. But I guess they had to add that for clarity and simplicity, but I just don't understand why you need that extra 5 feet to fall to the ground.
Because in theory, throwing yourself to the ground would use your movement speed to some degree, right?
I guess so. But a full fucking 5 feet? What if you're only a 2-foot character?
Yeah, I mean,
and you're like already technically on the ground in comparison to other people.
Yeah.
Like that's my only confusing one where I'm like, hey, I would rule that if I was a gnome, I'm already on the ground in comparison to the Goliath standing at 7 feet tall.
This is where we have to suspend our disbelief a little bit.
For sure. But like that's why I'm like, I don't understand why that was necessary, because being on the ground is different for every character.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyways, that's my only 2 bits.
Miaca, you were next.
I like I don't like this. I don't like the petrified thing. I mean, I feel like all the conditions make sense. Like, you know, they're a lot more realistic, but the petrified one as a player, I'm still like going through shit when I'm petrified. I don't like that. So.
I think it's particularly gross and deadly.
Yeah.
There's quite the existential crisis that you have.
Yep.
I think my least favorite thing, or the one that is the biggest change for me, is incapacitated is fucking terrifying. Because before you couldn't use actions. Now you can't use bonus actions or reactions either, which means you can't drink a potion. You can't do anything. You can't use your meta magic to cast some sort of lesser restoration to remove the condition to like, no, you're fucked. You can only move. Someone else has to save you from being incapacitated. And that's fucking scary.
Weirdly, it reads and it makes more sense to me that way. And yes, it's more scary because I know I'm going to complain about it the first time it happens to be in game. But like, it just makes sense that when you're incapacitated, that is what your limits are.
Yes.
So
yeah. It makes perfect sense. It's just scary from a game perspective.
Exactly. When the first time it happens to me, I'm going to yell at you at the table. That's just the Ascender butts about it. So
well, why would that be any fucking different than normal? Goddamn. You two are the two that yell at me at the table. At least with Dan, Dave, and Charlie, they just roll their eyes and give attitude for 10 minutes. You guys will actually stop gameplay to tell me to go fuck myself.
Correct.
Yep.
And I'm telling you, by fucking hour 4 of fucking myself, I'm pretty tired of this shit. Like, these sessions are taking too long.
Are you done? Are you quite finished?
Moving on. Further rules. This is the section that I am going to just kind of bounce off of a handful of little noodly mechanics from the rules glossary. There are some, besides just the definitions of actions that I mentioned earlier and the conditions. So let me tell you what else is in the rules glossary. There's a lot, and this is not a comprehensive list. But if you're looking for these things, they're available back here. There are definitions for all the main mechanics in the game. From bonus action, it's listed out clearly what does that mean, to AC, attunement, different kinds of movements and speeds. It's all there. You want to look up how fly speed actually works? It's there. Additionally, there are definitions for what friendly, hostile, and indifferent attitudes mean when it comes to dealing with NPCs. And I expect that we're going to see this gamified a little bit more when it comes to actually looking at some of the bard abilities and whatnot, when we're dealing with friendly, hostile, or indifferent creatures. It specifies that a creature is considered bloodied when it has half hit points or below. Weirdly, this isn't considered a condition. It's just they're considered bloody.
Does it mean anything? Like, is it just mean you can describe that you are bloodied and I am now bleeding from the nose, and that's just from a role-playing perspective? Like, there's no actual mechanic with it?
I expect that mechanic is going to take effect when you have things in previous editions. Gnolls would get an extra attack against bloodied creatures.
Got you. Okay, yeah, no, I remember that. That makes sense.
So I expect that we're going to see that in monster stat blocks, and maybe even in some class features or spells. So it has clear breakdowns in the rules glossary for breaking objects, for damage thresholds, for resistances and immunities and vulnerabilities. It explains a number of different hazards too, including rules for burning, dehydration, falling, malnutrition, and suffocation. It's all right there still. Jump mechanics are outlined. There's a high jump and there's a long jump, and they operate differently, just the same way they did before, but they're there in the rules glossary for you. So there's no longer, how does this work again? Look it up. It's right there. There's definitions for areas of effects. When it comes to the actual area themselves, we have a new phrase called an emanation, and that is when a spell centers on you and pushes out in all directions, like, for example, light, the light spell, right? That is now an emanation. Instead of a cone or a circle with a radius, it's an emanation. There are all sorts of senses. All of the senses, like tremor sense and dark vision, get a small spotlight too in the rules glossary. And yes, there are sections dedicated to all the bits and pieces that are confusing for new players, like knocking out a character, heroic inspiration, what that means because it's different now, surprise, which I talked about earlier, possession, rituals, shape-shifting, and the different kinds of light and cover. So all of that is in the rules glossary. How do you guys feel about the fact that this has been included in the PHP?
I think it makes sense. I mean, to add them in. I'm hoping we have an episode later on to cover like the new additions to like the hazards themselves, because we did a lot of research in previous episodes on the hazards from 5.0. And like seeing that, malnutrition and suffocations are in there, I kind of want to dig into those a little bit more and see what they actually offer.
Well, okay, so the hazard now is a tag that's given to these 5 specific mechanics.
Got it.
And because you pointed it out, I'll go through them right now because it's not deep.
Sure.
Before, hazards were like avalanches and whirlpools and magical electric storms that drop skulls from the sky. Like, it's different now, right? So it's just the same word, but used differently. I'm going to read them out loud because these are interesting noodly bits. I have not researched what the 2014 rules were on all of them, except I know the falling one off the top of my head. But we can go through them right now. And then Miaca, I'll poke you and see, is there anything in there that you want to learn a little bit more about? The first hazard is burning. A burning creature or object takes 1d4 fire damage at the start of each of its turns. As an action, you can extinguish a fire on yourself by giving yourself the prone condition and rolling on the ground. Stop, drop, and roll! The fire also goes out if it's doused, submerged, or suffocated. Pretty straightforward. Dehydration is a creature requires an amount of water per day based on its size, as shown in the water needs per day table below. It's listed out in gallons. Most small and medium creatures, by the way, which are what the player characters are, need 1 gallon of water. Large creatures like our mounts will need 4 gallons. But there are rules for all of the size categories. A creature that drinks less than half of the required water for a day gains 1 exhaustion level at the day's end. Exhaustion caused by dehydration cannot be removed until the creature drinks the full amount of water required for a day. I'm not sure it's going to come up often, but if it does, that can be punishing. Falling, a creature that falls takes 1d6 bludgeoning damage at the end of the fall for every 10 feet it fell. That's the same as it was. Maximum of 20d6, because I guess you hit your maximum velocity. When the creature lands, it has a prone condition unless it avoids taking any damage from the fall. A creature that falls into water or another liquid can use its reaction to make a DC 15 athletics or acrobatics check to hit the surface head or feet first. On a successful check, any damage resulting from the fall is halved. So that gets a little bit more information. It's good to have that funky mechanic for falling into liquids. For malnutrition, a creature needs an amount of food per day based on its size as shown in the food needs per day. Again, it's the same as the dehydration. It's 1 pound of food for characters, playable characters, and it's 4 pounds of food for our large mounts, right? A creature that eats but consumes less than half must succeed on a DC 10 Constitution saving throw or gain 1 exhaustion level at the day's end. A creature that eats nothing for 5 days automatically gains 1 exhaustion level at the end of the 5th day, as well as an additional level at the end of each subsequent day without food. Exhaustion caused by malnutrition can't be removed until it eats the full amount of required food for a day. And then finally, suffocation. This is going to be familiar. A creature can hold its breath for a number of minutes equal to 1 plus its constitution modifier, with a minimum of 30 seconds before suffocation begins. When a creature runs out of breath or is choking, it gains 1 exhaustion level at the end of each of its turns. When a creature can breathe again, it removes all exhaustion it gained from suffocating, which means it's likely that your barbarian or your sorcerer is going to end up with 6 minutes that they can hold their breath, or 60 rounds, if we put it that way. How do you feel about that, Megan? The hazards.
I like in comparison to the hazards that we had before. To your point, when you think hazards, you think weather shit. So when I see those ones, I'm like, that makes sense. The fact that as a non-drinking enough water a day girly, respectfully, go fuck yourself. I will drink water when I want to.
I want to say that I'm going to change that concept from water to just like fluid. Like the myth that coffee dehydrates you is insane. Like your mouth feels drier because of the texture of the liquid, but you're still drinking liquid. You still have a water content from that. That still counts towards your water a day. So your Monster Energy drinks count. I don't think liquor does because alcohol is different. But
I'm sorry, but I'm just like hearing, because I am a don't drink enough water girly, and my argument always is that the first ingredient in my Monster Energy drinks is water. And the look on Roman and Katie's face when that conversation always comes up just makes this conversation make me laugh even more. Because you're telling me that it counts, and so I'm going to use that as a reason now going forward.
Yeah, you quoted them. Adam supports me. See what fucking happens.
Adam supports it.
Yeah. Fuck me. All right. Also, take better care of yourself. We're all concerned about you. Miaca, before Megan responds to that, is there anything that you want to point out from the rules glossary?
I've never seen suffocation in gameplay before, so
That could
and
you haven't been around for all the water shenanigans we've done.
I know I feel like going through all this stuff. I feel like I've missed so much with the group because I've just been like la 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 in my own little land. But
But to be fair, they have not experienced role playing or shopping like you have.
this is true. But yeah, the suffocation thing it was a little crazy for me.
Yeah, I've got intense feelings about it. We have recently argued about it on the Discord. By the time this comes out, it'll be like ancient history. But at the time of this recording, we recently had one of the patrons be like, all right, I need a homebrew rule. Please, guys, in this Discord chat, please help. How am I going to handle shit underwater? Right. So, there were about 3 or 4 different methods for homebrewing it that popped up in there, which was really useful.
Yes.
The thing that I guess I would want to point out that I guess I didn't cover in this is the jumping mechanics. Just to point it out, because people will be curious, look at high jump first. When you make a high jump, you leap into the air a number of feet equal to 3 plus your strength modifier, with a minimum of 0 feet. So I want to point out, a barbarian can jump 8 fucking feet in the air. If you move at least 10 feet on foot immediately before the jump, you can do that. When you make a standing high jump, you can jump only half that distance. Still, a barbarian standing still can now go 4 feet in the air. Either way, each foot of the jump costs a foot of movement. But now we also get this. You can extend your arms half your height above yourself during the jump. Thus, you can reach a distance equal to the height of the jump plus 1.5 times your height. If you are a 7-foot tall orc and you have 5 into strength, which is not unreasonable, you can jump 15 feet. You can catch the thing 15 feet in the air above you. For long jump, it's a little bit different. When you make a long jump, you leap horizontally a number of feet up to your strength score if you move at least 10 feet immediately before you jump. So there's no more 3 plus, it's just your strength score. When you make a standing long jump, you can leap only half the distance. Either way, each foot you jump costs a foot of movement. If you land in difficult terrain, you must succeed on a DC 10 acrobatics check or have the prone condition. I like that. I think that's new. The long jump rule assumes that the height of the jump doesn't matter, such as a jump across a stream or chasm. At your DM's option, you must succeed at a DC 10 strength check to clear a low obstacle no taller than a quarter of the jump's distance, such as a hedge or a low wall. Otherwise, you're going to hit the obstacle. So if there's something in your way, you're jumping over a table, you'll need to make a athletics check at the DM's discretion. Any final thoughts about these rules changes that we've gone through at all, like today? Anything that stands out? Are you more positive about it, or are you feeling more negative about it? Is it too noodly now? Is it clearer? What are your thoughts?
I think my thoughts are well balanced in terms of there's some stuff in there that's a little extra noodly. I don't need it to be. And then there's a lot of stuff that they actually cleaned up. So again, you heard my complaints in the episode in terms of just like, again, being knocked, like dropping prone yourself. I don't see why that should take up a 5 foot of your speed. That doesn't make any sense to me. I like the cleanup of the actions table so that we know what we can do per turn. That definitely was one of my favorite ones. I think as a new player and a new DM, that's going to be one that you want on your screen. For anybody, I think that's going to be super helpful. And I like that was cleaned up a little bit. But other than that, everything else kind of like, again, feels kind of neutral or didn't like overexcite me or underexcite me or overwhelm or whatever term you want to use. Grappling, again, I like the fact that, as always, anybody can do it, but they simplified it a little bit for everybody. And I like the fact that they now do like strength DCs like they would with magic. I think that makes a lot more sense and is a little bit easier to digest and roll.
It's wild that we've never seen that before.
Yeah, like it seems strange that just wouldn't be something that was already existing, but I think that's a great addition. Because I don't, as a DM, because it didn't exist, I probably wouldn't have thought about it, to be honest with you, until I read that in the grappling rules and so on and so forth. So,
Miaca, what do you think?
I appreciate all the updates that were made and like the clarification. And so like as of right now, I'm like, yeah, okay, there, whatever. But I know as a player, once I like get in there and start actually like playing by some of these rules, I'm gonna be like, what? This makes no sense, because I don't like it, but it does make sense because it feels a little bit more realistic. You know what I mean?
So what you're saying is you just like to complain.
Pretty much. You're welcome.
Yeah, I really think that the mentality behind these makes, for the most part, a lot of sense. I really wish they had fixed that prone to unconscious nonsense. But I'm comfortable with this. This doesn't bother me. It's fine. I like these rules in a general sense. I'm curious to see how some of these, because how many times this episode did we say we'll need to see the monster stats? I wonder if this is going to meld nicely with different character builds, if there'll be class features that address this, and so on and so forth. Like, this does feel like only a part of the conversation, but it's an important part of the conversation, and we do need to understand it. And it seems like a good base to go off of.
I agree.
Yeah, I agree.
Well, with that, as always, thanks folks for listening to our information dump on some of the new additions and subtractions that came from the 2024 Player's Handbook here on It's a Mimic. We always appreciate you folks for sticking around and listening to our nonsense, so make sure to check back as we continue to digest this addition to the new landscape.
That's all for this transition episode of the It's a Mimic podcast. This episode and others can also be found on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, and most other podcast apps. Please take a second to engage with a like, follow, subscribe, comment, or review to help push our engagement. Thanks for listening to It's a Mimic, where you never know what you're going to get. If you'd like to support us, we have a store with some merch and a donate button on our website, itsamimic.com. You can also head to itsamimic.com to find a comprehensive episode guide and more information about the show. We do have a Patreon, which not only offers access to our exclusive Discord server, but also hosts over 100 episodes, including a variety of bonus episodes covering topics like 5th edition book reviews and the campaign builder, spells and gods, fae, homebrew inspiration, and even the Blood War. If you'd like to submit any mailbag questions, please reach out to us through any of the social media links in the show notes of this episode, or send us an email at info@itsamimic.com. This has been an episode of It's a Mimic, where you never know what you're going to get.